3 weeks ago, Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists murdered 33 Americans and 1,400 Israelis in the deadliest terrorist attack since September 11, 2001. These depraved savages killed more Jews in a single day than any time since the Holocaust. Israel is now at war and on the verge of what could be its bloodiest battle in a generation. In this struggle, Israel is not only fighting Hamas in Gaza, it's fighting a confederation of Iranian-trained, funded, and armed terrorist organizations. From the Houthis in Yemen to Hezbollah in Lebanon to Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the West Bank, Iran is besieging Israel by proxy. At the same time, Iran is conducting extensive attacks against Americans in the region. Since Joe Biden took office, Iran and its proxies have attacked American forces more than 100 times. Let me say that again, 100 times. That's why we need a person of strength as the U.S. ambassador in Israel. We need an ambassador who's a champion of the American-Israeli relationship, who can bridge the democratic-driven divides in the alliance. We need an ambassador who is clear-eyed about the Iranian threat and prepared to confront it. Instead, President Biden has nominated Jack Lew, who at times seems a better friend to Tehran than Jerusalem. The United States Senate should reject this nomination to be ambassador to Israel. A vote for him is a vote to subvert, not strengthen, our ally in its time of need. As President Obama's Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew was a leading proponent of the disastrous Iran nuclear deal. The deal delivered more than $100 billion to the Ayatollahs. Mr. Lew called the agreement a strong deal and said, "It will make our country safer, it will make our allies safer, and it will make the world safer." He apparently didn't consult our allies, though, before making that statement, because our allies in Israel certainly didn't agree. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu called the agreement a very bad deal. And one poll found that 73% of Jewish Israelis believe that the deal posed an existential threat to the Jewish state. Prime Minister Netanyahu was so opposed to the Iran deal, which Mr. Lew championed, that he traveled to the United States and addressed a joint session of this Congress to urge our opposition. Mr. Lew condemned Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech as beyond the pale and a huge mistake. Apparently, Mr. Lew also did not consult our own Democratic leader, the senator from New York, who also voted against the disastrous Iran deal. Worse still, Mr. Lew stood with President Obama when he refused to veto a United Nations Security Council resolution condemning Israel. This was nothing but an act of spite by Barack Obama against Israel's leadership. Yet Mr. Lew stood by his boss, dismissively asserting that, "I don't think it's a great thing for Israel to always have only the United States standing between it and condemnation." So according to Mr. Lew, I guess it's better to have Israel condemned than to have Israel's back. Mr. Lew apparently doesn't understand that doing what's right is sometimes lonely business. The next American ambassador to Israel must be prepared for the hard and lonely work of sometimes standing up against the rest of the region and indeed the rest of the world in defense of American and Israeli interests. Mr. Lew's glib comments demonstrate that he lacks either the nerve or the will to stand up for Israel when it really matters and the chips are down as they are today. But Mr. Lew didn't just advocate on behalf of the Iran nuclear deal or attack its Israeli critics. He lied to Congress to protect the deal, indeed to go beyond what the nuclear deal required. Mr. Lew told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in the summer of 2015 that Iran would, quote, "continue to be denied access to the American financial and commercial market," end quote. Mr. Lew also testified that Iranian banks, quote, "will continue to be denied access to the world's largest financial and commercial market." But 7 months later, in early 2016, Jack Lew's Treasury Department granted a license to convert almost $6 billion of Iranian assets into American currency using our financial system. This was not required by the Iran nuclear deal. This went over and above the dictates of that deal. But apparently Barack Obama and Jack Lew felt bad for the murderous Ayatollahs because they weren't getting enough economic benefit out of the deal. He even pressured 2 American banks to complete the transaction, and they sanely and patriotically said, no thanks, we don't want to touch Iran's blood money. That's not lying to Congress. I don't really know what is. But in addition to lying, Mr. Lew neglected to inform Congress that his department was sending its representatives around the world to encourage foreign countries and companies to do business with Iran. According to a Senate committee report authored by former Senator Robert Portman, the Treasury and State Department conducted more than 200 so-called road shows in foreign cities to encourage economic engagement with Tehran. Again, this is not required by the nuclear deal with Iran. Nothing said Jack Lew and his agents at Treasury had to act as the de facto investment bankers and business agents for the murderous Ayatollahs. He apparently felt so much sympathy for the Ayatollahs that he and John Kerry, as Secretary of State, would send their agents all around the world, hustling up business for Iran's terror regime. And now this is the man who's going to represent American interests in Jerusalem? The Senate should not confirm Jack Lew, a man who has lied to Congress both by omission and overt dishonesty. The Senate should likewise not confirm a man who has acted as the de facto investment banker and business agent for the bloodthirsty Ayatollahs. Mr. Lew's supporters have claimed that although flawed, we need an ambassador to Israel during this crisis, and Mr. Lew is the man in offering. But the fact is, no one is better than Jack Lew. And the sooner we defeat his nomination, the sooner we can find someone worthy of this critical post. I know my Democratic friends say we have to confirm Mr. Lew to show our support for Israel. I would turn that around and say we have to defeat Mr. Lew's nomination to show that our nation is finally serious about confronting the Ayatollahs in Iran. And there's no clearer or more immediate action that senators could take to show a new direction for U.S. policy on Iran than to reject the nomination of one of the architects of the Iran nuclear deal. Both the United States and Israel deserve a lot better than Jack Lew. I urge my colleagues to oppose his nomination.
Mr. President,
Senator from Idaho.
I ask unanimous consent that I be permitted to speak for up to 2 minutes and Senator Cardin be permitted to speak for up to 5 minutes prior to the scheduled roll call vote.
Without objection.
Mr. President.
From Idaho.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to this nomination, and I rise in support of our strong support for Israel. I understand it's important to move as quickly as we can to have an ambassador in Jerusalem. We are at an important moment in history with the events in Israel. This makes the stakes so much higher and important that we get it right. I believe it means we should take the time to get it right. This appointment that's been made is very disappointing. As my colleague just mentioned, it really ignores the fact that the underlying problem here is our policy and policies towards Iran. Certainly we all talk about Hamas. They've done horrible things, the horrific attack on Israel where they beheaded babies and killed innocent men and women in their beds sometimes, really deserves a response. But it also deserves for us to look at the underlying problem here, which is Iran. Hamas would not exist if it was not for Iran. Iran arms them, trains them, finances them, and directs them. We all know that. So How does that fit in with this particular appointment? Well, Mr. Lew did some things which were very much contrary, I believe, to what needs to be done in order for us to redo our policies towards Iran. When it came to the JCPOA, which, as we all know, there was a difference between our side of the aisle and the other side of the aisle on whether we should do the JCPOA or not, Mr. Lew was heavily involved in that. He promised us in the committee that he would not allow Iran to have access to the U.S. financial system. We know for a fact that after that, although he denied it, he did in fact attempt his very best to have Iran have access to the U.S. financial system. This is borne out by an official report of the United States Senate by the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. They interviewed the banks that Mr. Lew's attempts to twist their arms to give Iran access to the financial system. There was a very detailed investigation that was done on the fact. The facts are contained in this report. My good friends will say, oh, but that wasn't a bipartisan report. It is an official report by the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. My friends on the other side of the aisle, though, will not deny the facts that are in this report. And the facts are that Mr. Lew was involved in this as I've described. I want to support Israel. I think everybody on this floor wants to support Israel. The last thing we need is somebody who is very contrary to our view on how Iran should be handled. Mr. Lew's response to this was, well, everybody knew what Obama's policies were, and therefore everybody should have known that we would do anything to blindly support the policies. That's wrong. This is the wrong way to go about it. This is the wrong person at the wrong time in the wrong place. We should vote no and support Israel. Thank you, Mr.
President.
Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, a little over a week ago, I was in Israel with 10 U.S. senators, meeting with the Israeli leadership. And I must tell you, they are very much looking forward to having a confirmed ambassador from the United States in Jerusalem to help in regards to the challenges they're now facing as a result of Hamas's terrorist attack in Israel. And they're very much looking forward to Jack Lew being that ambassador. We heard that directly. His nomination has been welcomed by the Israelis, including Israel's foreign minister, who said he looks forward to working with them. The former Israeli ambassador to the United States wrote that Lew is, quote, a true statesman and a passionate Jew, a mensch in every sense of the word. He has the support of the Jerusalem Post, the Orthodox Union Advocacy Center, the Anti-Defamation League, and the list goes on and on and on. Why? Because he is so well qualified for this position. He's been confirmed by the Senate as the former Secretary of Treasury, as a Deputy Secretary of State, as an OMB director, and the list goes on and on and on. Confirmed by overwhelming majorities. It gives us the person as our representative to Israel that has the gravitas to stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel as the United States partners in the challenges that they're facing today. So there's, to me, no question about his qualifications, no question about his presence being welcomed by our Israeli friends, no question about his knowledge and commitment to these issues. He's worked his entire life part to strengthen the U.S.-Israel partnership. He knows the values. He testified to that during this confirmation hearing, and he testified in regards to the issues that my Republican friends are raising. The issues of whether he was forthright with Congress, and he was. He pointed out that in regards to opening up the banking for Iran, it was to comply with the JCPOA that was negotiated by the Obama administration, in which the Republicans were opposed to, and I opposed that agreement. I helped work with Senator Corker, then chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I was a ranking Democrat at the time, to develop a process where we would not be surprised by these negotiations, that we would have input into these negotiations. That process passed the Senate by a near unanimous vote. As part of that process, we had in-depth discussions with the Obama administration, including Secretary Lew, including Secretary Moniz, and others who shared with us exactly what was being negotiated. We knew that there was going to be transfer of funds in regards to the JCPOA. We recognized that the banking system would be open for that limited purpose. That's not misleading us. That's telling us exactly what we knew was going to happen before we even took it up under the review statute. So it's just not right to say he misled us. He did not. And the report they're referring to was a partisan report issued by the Republicans. There was a reason why it was not bipartisan. They were just trying to double down on their opposition to the JCPOA. Israel needs a strong U.S. ambassador who will represent America and be their partner in taking on one of the greatest struggles in their history from the terrorist Hamas, what they did on October the 7th. We need a confirmed ambassador who's knowledgeable as how they can represent over 500,000 Americans that are currently in Israel. We need Jack Lew's expertise to help us get the hostages back safely on the ground in Israel. I want to thank Secretary Lew for being willing at this time, at this critical moment, to serve his country in this critically important position. And I would hope my colleagues would vote for his confirmation, recognizing that we could not have a more qualified individual to represent America as our ambassador to Israel. With that, I yield the floor.